Prologue: The Fabricated World. There are some games that you play, and that's it. They only exist for you in that moment. But there are others that manage to hold on to you long after you first experienced them. Eve is what would be considered a cult classic within the indie horror space. Developed on rpgmaker 2000 by Corey, it was released for free on their website in 2012. It received a remake developed on rpgmaker MV just over 10 years later in 2022, which added several things like the zoom feature and conversation mode. This is the version we will be stepping into tonight. Hello, I'm Unknown Jack, and tonight we will be experiencing the Eve remake together. So come with me as we descend once more into the horrific and enchanting world of Giratina. The light of the sun and the brilliant blue sky are painted over and obscured by thick gray clouds on the day Eve's family paid a visit to the art exhibit of the late Weiss Giratina. It was Eve's first time in an art gallery. She was too young to know the meaning of the paintings and sculptures around her, too young to even know what many of the artwork's names meant. She was only 9, after all. Eve finds herself drawn towards a particular painting on the top floor. In it was the red rose that promised pain, and the lady in red, both of which were found previously in the exhibit separately, but now were bound in a world of colorful chaos. I had no idea how long she had been staring at the painting, but it was dark outside now, and oddly enough, everyone seemed to be gone. Making her way down the stairs, the lights flickered and sputtered out, leaving her in the dark. The door was locked. Had the gallery already closed, with Eve inside? Where were her parents? Why was she suddenly alone? Eve heard what sounded like heavy thumping footsteps from the empty floor Eve just came from. Trepidly, Eve started to make her way back up. Passing the second floor window, Eve sees a shadowy figure pass by, making her do a double take. Nothing is there. But as Eve leaves, she hears a frantic banging against the glass. And then it's gone. That, for now, is the least of Eve's worries. She follows the sound of the footsteps and sees how the gallery has changed in the short amount of time. A fruit falls from its portrait, splattering like red paint over the white floor. A painting of a black cat titled The Dark Figure meows at Eve in greeting. Going up to the third floor, Eve is met with a painting that had ensnared her from before. Only now there was something deep blue leaking from behind the portrait. And as she got closer, words splattered onto the ground behind her, beckoning Eve by name. The blue shifts into a promise to show Eve a secret spot of some kind. And the wet footsteps now lead Eve to the abyss of the deep that depicts a terrifying deep-sea creature. In many ways, Eve's story begins with this painting. The more you gaze into it, the deeper it seems, and the deeper it gazes into you. As we stare into the cold void below, it calls to her and beckons her to jump. She falls into the abyss, and everything goes black. Chapter 1: The Embodiment of Spirit. Eve awakens in a hallway between two paintings that mirror each other, one mold red and the other blue. The dichotomy between these two colors you will soon realize is a common motif. Eve is beckoned to take the red rose. It's almost too beautiful to be real. Fragmented words ring in her mind, but it's clear that Eve and this rose are linked. Should a petal of the rose be torn away, Eve would then suffer in kind, for she must know the weight of her own life. I'd like to talk about symbolism for a moment. Obviously, the red rose is known to symbolize love and beauty, but a lesser known meaning of the red rose is courage and a strong spirit, which is far more pertinent to Eve's character. The description of knowing the weight of life, or rather knowing the weight of your own life, has always intrigued me, especially in its connection to roses. But I'll speak more on this later. For now, just ponder that yourself, and let's continue with the story. Hair flows out from the painting of a woman who looks away and grins as Eve takes the blue key. And the word thief is splattered all over the hall in red. The accusation is clear. Beyond the blue door, Eve enters the green room and finds an ant who speaks to Eve about his woes. I'm an ant. I love painting. I want to see my painting, but it's kind of far away. The green door is locked, and the only other way to go has a gap that makes it impossible to pass normally. So Eve uses the painting of the ant as a bridge and retrieves another key, which leads a headless individual to chase Eve, fully destroying the painting and causing them to fall into the chasm below. Eve sees many strange things. A room with the eyes of a cat watching Eve, a moving nightstand with the legs of a woman, a series of portraits that murder one of their own for telling Eve the way to go. A tree that grows the winding of a key, another tree that bears a blue fruit that Eve feeds to a talking mouth attached to the wall. Better a fruit than Eve, at least. The mouth then opens up wide and offers Eve passage. Inside are paintings of a guillotine in sequence, leading back to before the blade fell. Eve creeps forward, and it is only Eve's hesitation that saves her, as a guillotine falls in front of Eve, only to miss her by a hair. She catches her breath. In a room where there are two statues opposing each other, two melted women, one red, one blue. And on the right there is that painting again, the lady in red, so similar to Eve and her mother. The lady in red laughs before she tries to escape her painting, but only manages to do so halfway. She chases Eve, crawling madly, dropping the red key in the process, which Eve swiftly flees with. This leads to a small library, which contains a green book that tells Eve that the women of the canvas are relentless in their pursuit, but can't open doors. The library or study also contains a crudely drawn story where a girl and a group of friends bake a cake for their friend Carrie's birthday. They have a galette de roi, more commonly known as the French king's cake, which is a cake with a coin baked into it. The girl named Carrie seemingly swallows the coin. Her friends laugh and call her Careless Carrie. Then the girl who baked the cake saw her mother worried. The key to the study was gone, and in its place, a coin. Oh, what could have happened to the key? Her mother bemoans. Her father will be so upset. Then the girl realizes that she was just as careless as Carrie, so she cuts open her friend to get the key. The story ends with the key found. The door unlocks, and the book is gone. In the next room, Eve finds a man writhing on the ground in pain, gripping a small key. Taking the key from the man and journeying further, Eve finds a room with blue rose petals and spots of blood on the ground, and a familiar memo about her rose. The petals seem to originate from a blank spot on the wall titled "The Lady in Blue." The trail leads to a door that can be unlocked with the key Eve received from the man. Inside is a canvas woman in blue, joyfully tearing petals off of a blue rose, seemingly playing Loves Me Not. But then it sees Eve and starts to chase, forgetting all about the blue rose entirely. Eve remembered what the book said about them not being able to open doors, so she runs out of the room. It's silent for a moment, but a loud shattering startles Eve. The canvas woman had used a stool in the other room to get high enough to break through the window. Eve escapes back into the room and picks up the blue rose. Eve deftly dodges the lady in blue and places the blue rose into a vase of water, restoring its life. And just as Eve's red rose is connected to her life, so too is this rose connected to the man, whose pain fades upon the revitalization of the rose. The man is initially scared of Eve, stating that he has nothing left to take, but realizes that she is a real person, unlike everything he's seen so far, and introduces himself as Gary. Eve returns his rose to him, and they decide to travel together. He tries to pull off the cool older brother persona, but it's immediately ruined by him getting scared of a painting that spat at him. Gary assists Eve in understanding the names of the paintings, as she is a child. Gary also moves objects around that block Eve's way, such as the headless statue in the blue dress that is blocking this door. Chapter 2: The Hanged Man. Blue roses often symbolize things that are rare or unique, as well as mystery or doing the impossible. Which is good, since escaping this place is looking harder by the second. The next room is wide and gray. Two shadowy arms emerge from the ground, towel the bride's left and right hand respectfully. And two paintings gaze towards them. On the left is the grieving bride, and the right is the grieving groom. Gary remarks that they are dressed in celebratory clothes of a wedding, so it's odd that they are grieving. A giant cat blocks the door. Attempting to touch the cat will have it sprout spikes from its body. Elsewhere, a painting giggles maniacally and asks for a flower, but Eve can't give them her rose. So she wandered in thought, wondering what to do next. There was a hallway, filled with eyes moving in every direction. A painting of a white snake with sunken, empty eyes. A room filled with stools and easels that all contained the same painting. At the end of the easel maze is a bottle of eye drops. Eve uses the eye drops on one of the eyes on the floor that is red and unmoving, and in gratitude the eye swims through the floor and stares at a spot on the way, telling Eve of a secret passage. In the passage, Eve finds a red glass ball. Eve puts the glass ball into the snake's eye socket, which causes the painting next to it to fall and reveal writing on the back of it. The ring doesn't actually appear before you get this note. It's also not always the skeleton. I believe it's just random chance which sculpture has it. But first we'll need to find the sculptures. We move to a room filled with four colored teapots with matching cups and an empty painting labeled Porcupus. Sounds familiar. By completing the Pokemon Ice puzzle and pouring the tea, the Porcupus is drawn back by the smell of it and returns to the painting, no longer blocking the door. In this room, Eve finds several sculptures, which Gary remarks that none of them were in the exhibit. The most notable of them, a colorful skeleton with a silver ring in his left hand, which they take. They head back over to the hand sticking out of the ground and place the ring on the bride's right ring finger. Their expression changes, and Eve gets the idea that they were grieving from the lost ring. The bride shows her bouquet, and the titles change from Grieving Bride and Groom to The Blessed Bride and Groom. Eve brings the bouquet to the painting to eat, and it leaves somehow, and lets Eve use its painting as a door. They arrive in a hallway lined with several heads, all with the same face, all of which stare blankly forward. 3 paintings line the walls behind them, also of the same man. One looks forward, the second follows Eve with his eyes, and the third is blind. The next room has many canvas women in them. There is the lady in red, the lady in blue, lady in green, and the lady in yellow. In front of the lady in yellow, we can find a ball with a hole in it. But there are also more than color variations. There is also the lady reading the newspaper, who complains it is too dark to read. And there is the lady gazing in emptiness, who has white hair and dress, but black empty eye sockets. There is a combination lock made into the floor that we need to find the code to. After some searching, we see the Hanged Man painting, which portrays a man upside down. His shirt reads 6952, but since he is upside down, it actually says 2569. Interestingly, before we wound up in this version of the art gallery, Gary can actually be seen staring at the Hanged Man painting. There are also many parallels between Gary and the Hanged Man, his self-sacrificial nature, and some events that happened in the Bad End route. And while tarot theming is not unusual by any means, it's worth noting how the Hanged Man is the only tarot card present in the game. 2 doors unlock, which leads to a safe room. There's a paper on the wall that says any who damage the exhibits will pay with their lives. Eve notices that a mannequin head from the previous hall has followed them, but Eve chooses to ignore it. Using this code from the Hanged Man, Eve opens the door and finds a golden fish with a horn that fits with the ball, and when combined reveals that it is a strange lamp. In front of Eve is a mirror that gives Eve a hint that they didn't need, and suddenly a mannequin head appears behind Eve and Gary, scaring him. Gary goes to kick the head, but is stopped by Eve, since she remembers the warning about damaging the exhibits. There was a barring on a door linked to her birdcage. Eve trades the lamp to the newspaper lady in exchange for her golden elephant statue, which Eve can then exchange to a nobleman for his golden bird, which Eve can then put in a birdcage to unlock the door. In this door, Eve finds a gray key and a painting of Eve's murdering father. Seeing her distraught expression, Gary tries to cheer her up. As they go to leave, they hear the metallic slam of the barrier being put over the door again, locking them inside. Then there is a pounding on the wall as cracks start forming and canvas women break and slither towards Eve, but Eve is able to avoid them and run through the hole they made. Exiting outside the room, Eve and Gary are able to see that those mannequin heads from before are now everywhere, blocking their path to the exit. The canvas ladies are also crawling everywhere. Particularly, the lady gazing at emptiness is much faster than the others. She glows a bright red, intent on catching Eve and pulling Eve apart like the petals of a rose. Luckily, Eve makes it to the door a split second before the vacant-gazed lady can grab her. This hallway feels familiar. It is much like the one they were in earlier. Paintings of a mannequin's head line the walls. This time there was a sequence. The farther you go, the more his eyes bleed, and the wider he grins. Eve stops. They seem to be fine physically, but something is wrong with her. Gary comments on her paleness, and she passes out in the hallway. Everything darkens, and Eve finds herself in a room with numbers scratched haphazardly into the floor. The mannequin heads from before are also here. Their squinted eyes turn red as blood spills from their mouth. Eve passes them. Eyes line the walls, and notes say, "Wherever you go, everyone's watching." Eve's father stands in the doorway, facing away from her, lamenting that he can't find her, and vanishes. Eve moves forward and sees that journal that we save at, and her rose that her vitality is linked to. This brings her a small comfort. But as she goes to touch the journal, it is covered in ink, ruining the pages. She tries the rose, and it melts at her touch. Next is Eve's mother, who also doesn't notice Eve behind her and leaves. Continuing forward, there is a hall of different colored painted ladies who giggle at Eve's distraught expression. And before her is the painting of her parents again. Eve runs down a narrow hall labeled exit, but it leads only to a dead end, and the lady gazing at emptiness rushes towards her. Eve awakens in a new room, holding Gary's jacket. Eve tells Gary that she had a nightmare. Gary isn't at all surprised, and comforts Eve by offering some candy that was in his jacket. They move forward and come to a painting named Separation. And as they look at it, the lights go out. Gary is scared at first, but remembers he has a lighter on him, and with it, we can see a warning that has been issued in red. Do not use anything that could start a fire. Outside the room, a messy line of red leads them to a door that was not there before. There, he bumps into a girl who introduces herself as Mary. Gary offers her to join him and Eve in searching for a way out, which she agrees. It's also revealed that Mary also has a rose, a yellow rose. They venture further to a room filled with rabbit sculptures and a painting of one titled Red Eyes, which Mary says is cute. A green rabbit leaps off his display, shattering, leaving behind a violet key. As they walk out, they pass an empty portrait titled Flowers of Jealousy. Just as Mary crosses it, a flower blooms and a wall of thorns erupt from the ground, separating Mary and Eve from Gary. With no other choice, Eve and Mary must go on and try to find some way to reunite with Gary. Chapter 3: Flowers of Jealousy. Before we continue, I'd like to talk about the symbolism of yellow roses. In the modern day, it mostly means positive things like friendship, joy, and gratitude. But in the Victorian era, there were symbols of jealousy. How fitting it is, then, that we are separated by a painting titled Flowers of Jealousy. Is there really anything more human than desiring what another has? Eve ventures with Mary to what seems to be an art supply room. There, Mary picks up the palette knife, which by her estimations would not be enough to cut the thorns separating them from Gary, but it may be useful, so she keeps it. As they are about to leave and return to Gary, the lights flicker, and now a statue, too heavy for them to move, blocks their way back. So the only way to go is forward. Writing appears on the wall saying, "I want you to have fun, Ebe. Come to a fun world without any grown-ups." Mary does not seem perturbed by this at all. Instead talks about the circus. And strangely enough, we then pass a painting titled Fallen Star that seems to depict the trapeze artists of a circus fallen to their death. Then there is a portrait of a clown and another painting that seems to be depicting the moment before the fallen star, and we get more writing on the wall. "We'll be together, you, me, and our friend." Mary has little to say about this. Here we find a blue rose tile, allowing us to play as Gary, who is getting increasingly worried about Eve and Mary. An interesting thing about Gary is that his rose actually has 10 petals versus Eve's 5, likely because of their age. Gary goes back to the red-eyed rabbit room. However, from his perspective, the room was always filled with creepy stitched dolls with blue skin and uncannily large red eyes. After some investigation, Gary notices some scuff marks on the floor and pushes the bookshelf back, revealing a hole in the wall, which he goes through. He finds a crescent-shaped hole in the floor and 5 pull switches coming from the ceiling. Pulling the first one damages you via poison gas. The second actually turns off the lights, which Gary is not happy about. The third one causes one of those creepy dolls from before fall from the ceiling and splatter onto the ground in a mess of red. The fourth one doesn't seem to do anything for Gary, but has opened a path for Eve and Mary. And the fifth one, a shadow hand, just smacks you. Going back to Eve, we can cross the bridge that Gary got for us. On the other side, we find a crescent-shaped item that we can push into the ravine, and then we move forward. But Mary stops Eve and wants to ask her something. She asks if Gary is her dad, which Eve truthfully says no. She asks if Eve's mom is nice, and Eve says yes. Mary says, "Lucky you," and says she also wants to get out of this place soon. And then she asks Eve if only 2 of them could get out of this place, who would she choose? Her or Gary? Which is a strange question. So I ask why she is asking that, and Mary says she was just curious and didn't mean anything. In the next room we see many strange paintings as usual. A painting of lips named Tattletale, painting labeled Fisherman, which Mary notes is not there, and a 3-piece work of a worm-like creature titled 2 of 1 Flesh, a working combination. There's also a strange room that makes everything in it gray, including the floating palette and brush, which seems to be a painting of a monochromatic rainbow. With seemingly nowhere else to go, Eve goes towards a strange winged mirror, which asks you the name of paintings in order to unlock the door. And by the powers of keen observation and complete guessing, we manage to complete the trial. In this room we find a large rolled up paper with a painting on it, which we take. There is also a book that seems to tell the story of Ebe getting lost in the art gallery, and another book that gives information on some of Guratena's works. We go back to Gary, who puts the crescent shape that had been dropped by Ebe into its clearly designated spot, and this causes the thorns blocking his way to recede. There he moves forward and finds that disturbing doll leaning against the wall. It says, "Hello there, Gary. I don't like being alone, so take me with you." To which Gary just straight up ignores. "Hey, why are you taking me? Why are you ignoring me? Do you hate me? Hey, play with me. I know lots of fun things we can do. I've got lots of friends too. I'll introduce you. Be here forever." Gary, getting rather fed up with it all, considers throwing it, but decides to just move it out of the way and keep ignoring it. Going forward, Gary finds a mysterious yellow paintball, and further on he sees artwork very similar to what Eve and Mary are dealing with. A worm creature in 3 parts, a fishing hook that does not seem to be there, a painting titled Custody of the Heart that has arms sticking out of it, but no heart, and of course a giant pallet that blocks the way forward for Gary. He notices there's a small amount of yellow on it, and realizes he needs to collect all 7 colored balls for it to move. There is also a room filled with poisonous gas. Gary's really getting the short end of the stick here, huh? Eve puts the painting she found in the middle section of the 3-part painting we had seen before, making it look like it swallowed a heart. Changing this painting also changes the other on Gary's side, causing it to spit up a beating glass heart. The painting of the juggler, who asked what year he was born or created, which we know was the year 6223, because Eve read it. How Gary canonically knows this is unknown, but hey, not everything needs lore. Also, yes, I skimmed over it, but the game takes place sometime in the year 6000. It's not really relevant to the story, but it is a thing. And we get a blue paintball. We give the giant hands the glass heart, which unlocks a door for us, where we find a green ball and a book about color theory, and a red umbrella which we take. We can also see a pink paintball further in the room, but it is blocked by thorns. We put the red umbrella on the fishing hook, and the fisherman reels it in. The creepy doll moves and says they want to join the treasure hunt, and we switch back to Eve, who takes the umbrella and gives it to a painting of a lady without an umbrella, and suddenly it starts raining inside, causing the dried turtle-like creature to come alive and act as a stepping stool, allowing Eve to rotate this painting of a half-red and half-green area. Switching back to Gary, this has reversed the tiles that are emitting poisonous gas, which lets us grab the violet paintball, but our path still seems to be blocked. Seems being the key word, as when I looked at this puzzle I thought, there's no way to do this without being damaged, which is true as far as I know. I solved all the other puzzles relatively quickly, but this one that befuddled me for longer than I'm willing to admit. But the solution was to simply lock the fuck in and power to the poisonous gas, allowing Gary to get to the other side of the room, where he can disable one side of the poisonous gases and take the clover shape over to its hole, and get rid of the thorns in that room, and removing the thorns that were blocking our access to the pink paintball, which we now acquire. Further into this room has an odd painting of a strained ear. In this room, Gary reads a book of Cortana's works, which contains info on the Serpentine Spirit, the Hanged Man, and Mary. The last work of Cortana's life, a painting of a girl that is almost lifelike, but is of course not based on a real person. Gary is confused and basically yells this in shock, causing the stranger to hear Mary's secret. Going down once more, Gary finds the cursed doll has the red paintball in its stomach, and it laughs and runs away as Gary gets it out. Gary follows the doll into a previously locked room, and here he finds a horde of disturbing dolls and a white paintball, which Gary takes. But as he turns to leave, he finds that the doors are locked again. The dolls invite him to another treasure hunt. You just have to find the key, they say, as the giant red-eyed doll starts crawling out of the painting. Luckily, I only had to go through 3 dolls before I found the key. With all the colors collected, Gary wastes no time and runs towards the stairs to try and find Ebe. Switching back to Ebe, we can see Mary looking intently at the painting of lips named Tattletale. It's clear that this painting is linked to the strained ear below. One hears secrets and the other tells them. Mary is suddenly in a rush and runs down to another room where a mannequin was blocking the way. Ebe instead goes to the monochrome room that is now filled with color. Since Gary obtained all the colors, Ebe can cross the rainbow bridge and obtain the brown key, which she uses to unlock the brown door. While attempting to go down the stairs, Mary follows Ebe and proceeds to have a crash out over Ebe not helping to move the statue. Not that we could anyway. Gary arrives and pushes Mary away from us, who passes out, I guess. And with Gary, we are able to push the statue to the side and go down the stairs Mary had wanted to go. Going down this path, the world becomes very saturated, and odd-looking meteors whiz past Ebe and Gary. Going further down, the path becomes what looks to be made in pink crayon, while crudely drawn sun and stars circle us somehow. The kindergarten art floor continues to what I guess is a town. Its colorful, scribbled appearance contrasting deeply with the black void it seems to be created in. Particularly disturbing, there is what looks to be a doll of Ebe hanging upside down by her leg, which Gary is unable to see. To go further, we need a toy key that's apparently in a toy box somewhere. One house has a black line drawn in front of it, which does not let us pass. But in the other scribbled house, we find a bucket. And as we are about to leave, Mary walks in brandishing her palette knife, but doesn't see Ebe or Gary hiding. With the bucket, we get some water from the river, somehow, which we use on a tulip that isn't blooming. After it's been watered, it blooms and gives us a mirror as things, which we use to reflect the scribbled sunlight onto the door of the eye, causing it to wake up or unlock. Then, by understanding what the puzzle was asking the first time, and not brute force save scumming, we solved the puzzle that wanted us to memorize the area, which gives us a pink crown, which we use to draw over the black line and enter. There we find the toy box. It's so deep that we can't see the bottom of it. They hear a small "wanna see?" as they are pushed into the toy box by Mary. As Eve awakens, she realizes that Gary isn't with her, and she doesn't have her red rose either. Trekking to the toy box, we see scribbles that seem to depict the puzzles that we have already gone through, and a myriad disturbing dolls that watch her wander. Eventually, Eve finds Gary and her rose, though it only has one petal left. They find the key that they were originally looking for, which causes the dolls to chase after them. We flee to what could generously be described as a staircase, and Eve and Gary move back up and find themselves in the room where the toy box was before. Only thorns and yellow roses block their way now. The risk of injury is too high to attempt to rip them, so they opt instead to burn them away with Gary's lighter. On the other side of the room, there was a portrait with broken glass scattered about. This is Mary's painting. As Eve and Gary go towards the painting, Mary appears behind them and screams at them to get out, to not get any closer. She then runs towards them with a knife, and so they run towards her painting. And time freezes, and there is a decision to make. In that split second, I decided to burn Mary's painting. Flames engulfed the frame, shattering glass everywhere, and turning Mary to burnt paper ashes. Gary worriedly checks on Ebe, but it was him who was injured with a cut on his hand. Ebe offers her handkerchief to Gary, and they set off to find the exit. Using the toy key, they go into a dark room and head down the stairs, going deeper and deeper still in the dark. Then they find themselves in the Gotena Gallery. Only now everything is pitch black instead of white marble they remembered. They go up to the third floor to see the painting that began this nightmare, the fabricated world. Only now it had changed. It had people that looked vaguely familiar to Gary and Eve, and it now contained the creature from the abyss of the deep, breaking from the white gallery floor. As they stare closer at the painting, its frame disappears, allowing them to step into it, should they wish. Gary jumps in without hesitation, but just as Eve is about to follow, a voice calls her name. It's her mom, who says she's been looking everywhere for Eve, and that her father is waiting too. Gary beckons her, but her mom reprimands Eve for following strangers. Gary holds out his hand, and Eve must make a decision. Go with the person who has helped her through every step of this abstract nightmare, or go with her own mother, who she's been looking for this whole time. Can she trust that this painting will really lead them back to the real world? Can she trust that this is even her mom? In the end, I went with Gary. I never saw any reason to believe this was really Eve's mom. Eve takes Gary's hand, and everything goes white. And she's there again, standing in front of the original fabricated world. She doesn't remember what she was doing, but she walks through the gallery, and everything is as it was. Her parents are okay. She eventually finds Gary, staring at the red rose sculpture, the embodiment of spirit. Gary says when he looks at the rose, he feels deeply sorrowful for a reason he does not understand, and apologizes, saying he shouldn't say stuff like that suddenly to Eve. But then is confused. Who is Eve? He says, and is surprised when he learns that is her name. He can't shake the feeling that they had met sometime before, but decides to walk away. But stops as he notices the bloody handkerchief that says Eve on it within his pocket. Then, all at once, it comes back to him. He was wounded, and a girl, Eve, lent him her handkerchief. He remembers the cursed gallery and all they went through. Eve remembers as well. Gary wants to talk, but he has to leave now, and asks to keep the handkerchief so he can return it clean. Because one day, they will see each other again. Gary holds on to Eve's handkerchief, and Eve holds on to the candy Gary had given her. And with something to remember the other by, we end on a promise of reunion. The most wholesome of endings, in my opinion. and what most consider the true ending. Epilogue: The Abyss of the Deep. As an artist, something that resonated with me was the themes of art and life that are embedded into the story. The horror and beauty of art and creation. It may seem contradictory, but I think many are like myself and feel oddly at home in a game like Ebe. As Cesar A. Cruz put it, art should comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable. Art has more power than anyone really gives credit. It can evoke emotions dwelling within us. It can change lives, rip people apart, bring them together, incite revolution, push us to the brink, and inspire us to live. Ebe, at its core, is about what it means to be alive. We are a garden of roses in a storm. We wilt and bloom. We give beauty to the world and cause suffering with our thorns. If I can be real with you for a bit, I connected with this game on a deeper level as a child because I felt like Ebe. I've had clinical depression over half my life. I know what it's like to feel alone, to be surrounded by things you don't understand, to be lost and want nothing more than to see the end of the labyrinth of life, to just give up. Over 10 years later, and I'm still depressed and have suicidal thoughts. But things are better for me. I finally understood the weight of my own life in a way I couldn't before. I think all you really need in life is two things: someone that always has your back and knows you always have theirs. That's something I never thought I'd have, but life is messy and abstract, simultaneously too colorful and too dull to make out. You never really know what's going to happen next, for better or worse. If you can find someone who really sees you for who you are, and you can really see them in return, you should take their hand when it's offered. The second is creation. I believe everyone to some extent wants to create something, whether that be painting, world building, fanfics, graphic design, role playing, music, writing, anything. It is imperative for the wellness of your person and for the good of our world that you find what that thing is for you. It's scary diving into something you have little experience in or don't know a lot about, but I believe everyone needs to understand that art in any form is freedom and empowerment. I don't know what happens to Eve or Gary after the end, but I'd like to think that they decide to create something positive out of the horror they experienced. To create, to breathe life into something of your own design. That's how you start to understand the weight of life.